Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Atheist Experience. I'm your host, Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week is Jeff D.
Hi, folks.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
I just saw you yesterday, but we'll get to the nonprofit stuff in a little while.
Yeah.
We are live. It's Sunday, September 24th, 2006, and I'd like to say hello and welcome to everybody who's watching live. The audio portion of this program is also available from our website and as a podcast, so a special hello to those people who are listening after the fact. We're not going to be putting out the number for those people. There have been a lot of questions about that. The reason is that the number is shared by all the shows that are produced out of the studio. So if you were to call when we weren't on the air, you're going to be interrupting somebody else's show. We don't want that to happen to us, and so we'd rather it didn't happen to them as well. But this is a live, interactive, public access show put on by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. It's a chance for the Atheist Community of Austin to interact with the public, to answer questions, present our views on issues, discuss, debate ideas, philosophies, whatever. We'll be having the number up for you shortly for those of you who are watching live, so you can call in. The ACA has weekly meetings every Sunday at Romeo's on Barton Springs Road at 11:30. Except for the third Sunday of the month when we host a lecture series at the Austin History Center at the corner of 9th and Guadalupe. Today was the third Sunday. There was no lecture today. Instead, yesterday we did a special event. We went out and did a bat cruise because Austin has a large population, or the largest.
The world's largest urban bat population.
Yeah, it's
I think
huge.
is what they say.
But we went down there last night. There's a cruise service behind the Hyatt that we used, met up, and it was pouring and lightning, and just everybody thought we were going to have to cancel. And just before the boat took off, everything cleared up, and we had a great little 2-hour excursion out there with food and drink, and had a good time. Yeah. A 2-hour tour, but it's one of the best ways to watch the bats. A lot of people go down to the Congress Street Bridge to watch the bats. The thing is that because of the direction the bats travel, you've got the sunset behind you, and you're trying to look at the bats into the darkness. When you're on the boats, you actually are watching the other direction, so you get the backdrop of a sunset. And it was really, really nice to see all the bats. Thanks to everybody who showed up and turned up for that event. Thanks to Joe Zemecki and Marla Repka for organizing and arranging it. We had a good time, and the ACA is going to be doing more events like that as long as people are interested. The information on any of those will be up at our website, www.atheist-community.org. Also, if you get in touch with board members or attend any of the regular events, you'll get more information about that. In addition to sponsoring this program, the ACA also sponsors a bi-weekly internet audio program called The Nonprofits. It's PROPHETS. It's hosted by Jeff D., co-hosted by Dennis Loubet, features Russell Glasser and myself. We were live yesterday. We'll be live again October 7th at 2 p.m. You can get more information at nonprofitsradio.com. The previous episodes of that are available for podcast and download as well. In addition to the various programs, the ACA also sponsors a number of events in addition to the bat cruise that we did last night. And our weekly meetings at Romeo's and lectures. There's also social events throughout the week, including happy hour on Thursdays at 7:30 at Ninfa's, which is on Anderson near 183 and I-35. You come down, have dinner and drinks, meet some of the people in the group. And everyone involved in this show, or most everybody involved in this show, tends to go to Threadgills after each episode. We're on the air till 6 o'clock. We normally get to Threadgills around 6:30. That's on Riverside at Barton Springs. We'll be there roughly 6:30, 6:45. All of our events are open to the public. Any atheist or atheist-friendly people who would like to come and attend one of the events, you're more than welcome. Membership is not required. But if you're coming down to preach, proselytize, or provoke, please don't. You can call in or you can email us, and that's probably one of the last points I wanted to get to during the announcements. The information is available at our website, but anybody who doesn't get through today on the telephone or can't because they're listening after the fact can email tv@atheist-community.org. That goes to myself, all of the co-hosts, the people behind the scenes, so it can be feedback or questions regarding things we've talked about, things we should talk about, or even production issues if you really wanted to. When we take calls, we tend to get a lot of the same questions over and over again. There is a frequently asked questions or FAQ portion or site available on the ACA website. So sometimes if we end up getting the same question a couple times in a show, not to be rude, but we're gonna send you on your merry way and recommend you read the FAQ or tune in next time, because we're likely to answer that question again anyway. We get a lot of questions of, what is atheism, and there's some really good Atheism 101 information up at the site. So we'll have the number up for you shortly, but Jeff D's joined us this week and brought in a whole slew of stuff.
Yeah, Matt, you mentioned our other audio show, the Nonprofits, and we did a show yesterday, and we had a very interesting discussion about something recently said by Sam Harris, who recently published a book called The End of Faith. And that is only one of a number of atheism-related books that have come out in recent years and gotten a lot of press. So I thought, after the show, it got me thinking about books about atheism and the ones that I've collected over the years and related things. So I thought I'd bring in a stack of things from my library and talk about them and sort of tell the story of atheism, the story of the publication of atheist thought in books, and the story of my personal journey into atheism by way of the books in my collection. So I want to start with Why I Am Not a Christian by Bertrand Russell. This is the first book that I ever encountered that talked about atheism in any kind of detail, and it talked about it in a positive light. And it was sheer random chance that I bumped into this thing. I was at a friend's house. I was much younger in those days, and went into he was living with his parents, and I went into the bathroom, and in their bathroom, their bathroom reading material included Bertrand Russell's "Why I Am Not a Christian." This is it's actually a collection of philosopher Bertrand Russell's speeches and essays, the main one being Why I'm Not a Christian. The collection was published in the 50s. I don't know when the actual address was delivered, but I was raised in a Christian home and never really heard much of anything about atheism or unbelievers except in a disparaging way. And here's this book by a guy that is not only not a believer, but pretty open about it. Now, this friend's parents were kind of wacky, new age goofs, to put it as politely as I can. So it was really sheer random chance that they happened to have picked up this thing and had it in their house for me to stumble across. But this didn't convert me. I didn't have time. I read a few pages and went, so it's possible to not believe in a God and feel pretty good about it. Years and years and years went by, and I got really interested in science and recent scientific advances, and I had this book recommended to me, which doesn't directly have anything to do with atheism, but it was the catalyst that made me get really serious about understanding the true nature of things. It's called Innumeracy, Mathematical Illiteracy and Its Consequences. It's not a big book, but it's by John Allen Paulos, and he talks about common mistakes that people make with statistics, with mathematics, and how to avoid those mistakes. And it really woke me up to the fact that our nation has a serious problem with ignorance and mathematical illiteracy. So that's really what got me started looking around. Now, I've discovered since then that atheism wasn't new. Bertrand Russell didn't invent it in the 1950s. Relatively recently, this book came out. It's called Doubt, A History by Jennifer Michael Hecht. And this is a history of the world from the perspective of and focusing on skeptics, doubters, unbelievers. And there's a lot of material here. This is a big book. If you think about it, every time some religion has fallen out of fashion, it's because there were doubters. And there were times when, Christians in Rome were doubters of the Roman religion. But the histories don't tend to get written about the movements of doubt and skepticism. So that's why she wrote this book, is to cover that kind of history. One particularly interesting thing that I found in this book, which I'm looking for verification of, is her claim that, we always hear about the persecution of Christians in Rome. Well, according to Jennifer Hecht, the Romans did not have freedom of religion in the sense that America has it now. What they had was a system where if you wanted your religion to be legal, you had to submit it basically to the Roman government and get it approved. And they approved all kinds of religions. All kinds of little foreign cults and belief systems were completely legal in ancient Rome. But the Christians had trouble getting recognized as legitimate. And moreover, she says, all this stuff, we frequently hear Christians referring back to Greek philosophers, claiming that the things that various Greek philosophers have said about gods were talking about their God. Even though the ancient Greeks, those philosophers, were not Christians, had never heard of the Christian God. They were just trying to rationalize their own belief system. But what happened was that the Christians went to the Roman government when they were seeking recognition, official legal recognition, and said, those things the ancient Greek philosophers said about God? That's our God they're talking about. That's why we should be legitimate. And that is why, to this very day, we have Christians referring to Greek philosophers in justification for their beliefs, which in many ways leaves their belief system open to even more criticism. Another great book that I picked up about the history of atheism is this book, An Anthology of Atheism and Rationalism. It's a collection of essays written mostly by British freethinkers in the late 1800s and very early 1900s. And I found this book to be fascinating because those people were living in a society where there was also not freedom of religion. They had these things called blasphemy laws, where if you said something like you didn't believe in God, you could be thrown in prison. They had to put up with things like having their print shops burned down. Like they would build their own print shops so they could make handouts,
leaflets,
flyers, leaflets. Thank you. To get their point across, much like the way we have a public access TV show to get our views heard, and crazed crowds of angry, kind, loving Christians would descend on their print shops and burn them to the ground. This finally ended with the election of Charles Bradlaugh, who was one of the big movers and shakers in British rationalism. Charles Bradlaugh being elected to Parliament and then having to face a rule that they had in Parliament that he had to take a God oath, and he didn't want to take it. And rather than that keeping him from his seat, it caused a big political debate, and eventually that rule was done away with. And that has led to much more freedom of religion in Britain. So I found that to be a very inspiring book. Another really amusing bit that I encountered in here was an essay. I forget which writer wrote this thing, but he was talking about the origins of the universe and why the Christians must be wrong. Back in those days, they didn't know about the Big Bang. They didn't know about the expansion of the universe or any of that stuff. To them, it looked like it was static. And so the argument made by the atheist was, well, Christians say that the universe was created by God, and we know because of the laws of thermodynamics that nothing could be created or destroyed in that way. So something cannot come from nothing, and therefore Christianity must be wrong, and there must not be a God. which is, of course, very much like the argument that Christians make today. They try to spin the something can't come from nothing argument and say, therefore, there must be God. Of course, these atheists, even back in the late 1800s, understood that God counts as a something, and you can't solve the question of how does something come from nothing by invoking a God, because the God's existence would be a something coming from nothing. I just thought it was interesting that the two sides were sort of flip-flopped on the issue. The atheists following the actual scientific evidence where it led, and the Christians merely redefining their arguments in order to oppose the atheist arguments, no matter where they're coming from. Much more recently, there is a book, Free Thinkers by Susan Jacoby. This has been pretty well received. This is sort of similar to the book Doubt, but it specifically relates to American secularism. Talks about the whole Founding Fathers issue and freedom of religion, separation of church and state, and atheism in the United States. Well, that's all fascinating stuff about the history of atheism. When I became an atheist shortly after, let me rephrase that. When I became an activist atheist, like going out, making an effort to go out and learn more, shortly after reading the book Innumeracy, a lot of people recommended this to me, and so I picked it up, and it's absolutely fantastic. Losing Faith in Faith by Dan Barker. Dan Barker was a fundamentalist minister, and most of his ministry had to do with writing and performing music. He, to this very day, gets royalty checks for some of his plays and songs that are performed by Christian groups. But he slowly, over time, became aware that he was having trouble believing this stuff, and he asked questions. He didn't get the answers that would be needed to solve his dilemmas. And so he became an atheist, and this book is a collection of his essays, letters that he wrote to people to inform them of his atheism, responses to their responses, and so on and so forth. It's, I would call this probably the essential book for atheists nowadays who want to get a very complete, broad, well-rounded view of all of the different issues surrounding atheism. And in a similar vein, but focusing specifically on that, there's Douglas Kruger's What is Atheism? A Short Introduction. And this is specifically on the issue of atheist thought, responses to Christian criticisms and Christian claims, and religious claims in general, not just Christian. And if you want to go in depth onto the specific arguments, this is a great book. As I became more aware of atheism and more open to noticing it in the world around me when it cropped up, I realized that not only did atheism not get invented by Bertrand Russell in the 1950s, but atheism does not just show up in books about atheism, histories of skeptics and their cold, dry arguments. It appears many places in literature. Now, I'm a science fiction and fantasy fan, and have been for a long, long, long time, since reading The Hobbit when I was a little kid. So over the years, I've collected a whole lot of science fiction and fantasy books, and I just wanted to go over a few of them that get into this territory in an interesting way. They're not about atheism, but the whole issue of religion, of the ethics and morality related to the whole question of gods and things like that are addressed. There is a series of books about a character called John Carter of Mars. These were written by Edgar Rice Burroughs, who's the creator of Tarzan. And the first John Carter book came out, I believe, in 1916, maybe 1914, somewhere around there. It's about a man who is, when at the start of the book, he is a retired Civil War cavalry officer. The war is over, and he's just sort of making it in life as an adventurer. But for some reason that is never explained, and the character himself says that he can't explain it and doesn't understand it, he's immortal. His memories apparently sort of peter off when he thinks farther and farther and farther back in time, but clearly he's been around at least since ancient Rome, and all that time been a fighter on the sides of various armies in the cause of good. Well, at the start of the first book, he's whisked off to the planet Mars, also in a way that's not terribly well explained. This is really, really, really early science fiction, I should mention. And it's heavily influenced a lot of science fiction that's come after, but it's also kind of clunky and cobbled together and not to everybody's taste anymore. Though they have recently been trying to get some feature films made from these books. In any case, the reason why this is relevant to the whole atheism question is the first 3 books in the series comprise a trilogy about John Carter going to Mars and discovering that they have this religion of the goddess Isis, who is which also happens to be the name of this one river. And the believers in Isis, people on the planet Mars, by the way, also live to be thousands and thousands of years old. But when they're tired of living, the Martians would get on a boat and go down the river Isis. And the belief was that there was a paradise at the end where they would live forever with the goddess. Well, John Carter winds up having to go down there during the course of the 3 books and finds out it's a lie. The whole religion is just a trumped-up way of getting a steady stream of people to go down there and become slaves. And I thought that was fascinating. Another book that's interesting from the religion perspective is Lord of Light. There's no cover on this. Lord of Light by Roger Zelazny. Zelazny is also famous for the Amber series, which are also quite good. Lord of Light is about it's a science fiction book about a group of colonists who go to an alien planet, and they're on a ship where most of the crew are kept in cold sleep. And when they get there, the crew that's awake says, we've got this amazing technology. We don't see why we should give up any of our power over the people that we have transported to this planet. We think that they should pretty much serve us. So they set themselves up as gods. And because one of the main pieces of technology that they have is a device that allows them to transfer a mind from one body to another, and they have the technology to clone new bodies whenever they need them, they basically have control over life and death. And the religion is all about, you do as we say if you want access to the technology where we will enable you to continue to live when your current body is worn out. Well, the book is about the one member of the crew who objects to the abuse of the colonists, who are held down to a low level of technology. That's another thing imposed by these self-created gods. They say, well, we don't ever want to lose our power over the people, therefore anything that starts looking like advanced technology, I believe flush toilets or something that come up, where the gods basically vaporize the house of an inventor who comes up with the flush toilet. This guy says, no, I've got all the powers of all these people that call themselves gods, but I don't think that the way that they abuse their power to keep the rest of the people down is appropriate. So he sets himself up against them, and it's a story of his war to take them down. Now, the crew that turn themselves into gods take on the names of gods from Hindu mythology. So you have a Shiva, who and they get really into role playing these Hindu mythology names they've taken on for themselves. So Shiva has got this disintegration ray gun that he carries around, and Agni, the fire god, has this fiery chariot, which is clearly a rocket ship that he flies around in. And the hero of the book is the guy who decides to set himself up as the Buddha, and he uses that. He uses the same sort of tactics. He basically fakes a religion centered on himself, but he uses it to get across to the people the idea that they shouldn't kowtow to those gods, not even him. Very recently, there's a series of comedy fantasy novels, sort of along the lines of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but fantasy rather than science fiction, by Terry Pratchett. They're called the Discworld novels because in them the people live on a planet that is a disk. And one of the books recently is called Small Gods. It takes the premise that gods are real entities in this fantasy world. Of course, they would be, because it's a world with magic and sorcery and magical creatures and stuff like that. But they do get their power from being worshipped. And in Small Gods, the premise is that this one god who used to be big and powerful has fallen on hard times, not because his religion has gone away, but because the believers have sort of wandered off from his original teachings and are believing in and worshiping something that doesn't actually happen to be him anymore. And so, because he's not getting the support of the people, he has dwindled down to nothing more than a talking turtle. And at the beginning of the book, he reveals himself to one of his followers and says, "You've got to help me regain my power." And they have a series of adventures, which is all about getting him back in his position as the god of the religion. But the climax of the book comes when the worshiper who he has enlisted to help him says, "Okay, fine, you can be our god again, but we're going to have a constitution that says what you may and may not do to us, what your rights and responsibilities are, and what our rights and responsibilities are." And the god goes, "You want a constitutional religion?" And the guy says, "Yeah," which I thought was fascinating.
What does God need with a starship?
Right, from Star Trek. Okay, another book that's come out recently. It's a series called His Dark Materials. The first one in the United States is called The Golden Compass. I believe it has a different name in Britain, and I don't remember what it is. The author is Philip Pullman. Now, Philip Pullman is an outspoken atheist who says that he wrote these books as a direct response to the Chronicles of Narnia. And they're young adults books about the adventures of a girl, Lyra, from this parallel world, which has a lot more magical things in it than ours, but characters from our world come in during the course of the series. And it's basically about a rebellion of the people of the multiverse against the so-called gods who want to lord it over them in a similar way to Lord of Light, except that in this case we are talking about beings who ultimately are the Christian God and his angels. And they're making a movie about this right now. Okay, almost done. Very recently, there's been a series of books, extremely critical, analytical books aimed at religion in general. And the one that we talked about on our audio show, which I won't say too much about right now, because if you want to hear more about it, you can just listen to our audio show podcast. This is called The End of Faith by Sam Harris. And it's a critical analysis of the whole idea of taking stuff on faith and how it is incredibly dangerous for people to do this, to basically believe stuff without evidence, believe stuff that might well not be true, that has nothing going for it other than the fact that a whole lot of people believe it, in a world where that can lead to things like the terrorists flying airplanes into buildings, and we have nuclear bombs. And also, Daniel Dennett, a philosopher, has recently written Breaking the Spell, which refers to the sort of unassailable, specially respected traditions of religion and how they don't really, if you think about it, deserve special respect and ought to be open to scientific inquiry as to why people believe stuff like that, and what are these feelings that people are feeling when they believe they're having religious experiences, and so on. And so about half the book is his argument that it should not. Science should not have its hands off of religion. Religion is, like any other human enterprise, ought to be something that can be studied scientifically.
Yeah, there's no question about reality, what is or isn't, that science shouldn't be able to address.
Right. Right, and it shouldn't be necessary to make that argument, but that's the world we live in. We're in a culture where it is considered out of bounds for people to question, criticize, or even to closely examine the deeply held beliefs of others.
Yeah,
and so this is a book attempting to dispel that myth, and also he offers his own very sketchy and, by his own admission, probably not accurate theory of what the origin of religious practice is, why it is that people have such a thing, how it could have arisen, and what its function was back in the day. Now, next month, there will be another book along the same lines. We're getting a real heavy, rapid-fire succession series of books of that kind criticizing religiosity in general.
Yep.
This one is by Richard Dawkins, and it's called The God Delusion, which I'm really looking forward to, but I can't tell you anything about it other than there's reviews on the internet, and it's coming out next month. So,
yeah, I've really been looking forward to that one for a while. Dawkins is an evolutionary biologist, and his previous books, Unweaving the Rainbow and let's see, Climbing Mount Improbable and the Blind Watchmaker, all took a look at evolution as a meme, not only biological evolution that we're used to, but this evolving ideas throughout consciousness. And he hits religion off and on in those books, but for largely they were rational defenses of evolutionary theory. He's been outspoken with regard to religion and even produced a couple of TV shows for the BBC, which was The Root of All Evil.
Yes, not his title, and he apologizes for the title. He does not. He says he does not mean to suggest that religion is the root of all evil any more than anything is the root of all of anything else.
Yeah. But he'd done those shows, and I've read almost all of his books and enjoyed them. He's one of my heroes among a handful of others. Dennett being another one. Dennett's got a lot of other books that cover topics of free will and determinism, and he takes Dawkins' ideas about evolution as a meme and spins them philosophically into how do we go about thinking about things, religion and other philosophies, and how can we use those memes, etc.
Yeah.
So, and Harris has a new book. Sam Harris's new book
Yes,
is
that's correct.
Letters to a Christian Nation,
which was written from the notes he compiled during the course of responding to criticisms he got from religious people who were writing back about his book, The End of Faith. I want to mention one other thing that I noticed going through these books is that in the last couple of decades, there seems to have been 3 different waves of atheism books. Back in the late 90s, the first books that you saw, or early to late 90s, the first books that I can find that had to do with atheism that were coming out were all things like Losing Faith in Faith, or what Kruger's book, What is Atheism? They were all justifications of the atheist viewpoint and explanations of that viewpoint, right? They were about explaining what atheists are, what they think, and why we think that it makes sense. Then there was another wave of books that were about the history of atheism, right? In the early 2000s. That's when we got free thinkers and doubt and books like that. And now, just in the last couple of years, there have been one after another, these books saying, okay, fine. So that's what atheism is, and it's a noble and ancient tradition that we can be as proud of as anybody else, and now we're going to tell you exactly what we think about religion.
Yeah.
And I thought
we had a caller on the line, but it seems to have hung up. As a reminder, we are live. It's September 24, 2006. We're on till about 6, well, from 4:30 to 6, and it's 5 o'clock now. The number's up on the screen if you're watching us live here in Austin. Feel free to call in. You don't have to talk about it, any particular topic, just whatever's on your mind, or one of the books, or come up with your own comments about what we've been discussing. But yeah, I agree. The books have kind of come in waves, and also there's been a shift of. There are some books that were. Like, I love Dan Barker's book, Losing Faith in Faith. It's a justification of atheism, and it specifically shows the things about Christianity that he rejected and why, but it builds primarily a case for atheism. What we're seeing now with, and I haven't read it yet, but what I'm assuming we're going to see with Dawkins' book next month, and with the things that Sam Harris has been putting out, are really kind of anti-religion manifestos.
They really are.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like it really seems to me. I mean, if I've been involved in atheist activism now since the early '90s, and so I've seen these waves of books come out. And I remember when the atheist community of Austin was a very small handful of very grumpy, timid old people meeting at a bagel shop and terrified of doing anything. In fact, I left the group for a while when. Joe Zemecki, who is now back and who organized the Bat Cruise, he was pushing for an atheist public access TV show, but the mood of the group was, no, we don't want to do that. We are too afraid of pissing off Christians. And they were literally terrified that at any moment Christians might find out that they were having an atheist meeting and burst into the bagel shop with machine guns. It was like that. And when it seemed to me that these folks are never going to do anything, I actually left for a while and I hung out with a group, the UT Skeptical Society. College students more concerned not so much directly with atheism, though that was certainly part of it, but generally with scientific illiteracy and paranormal beliefs and stuff like that. And then the ACA started the show, and I came back, and it was the group was growing, and I've watched atheism really come into its own as a social movement. It's just phenomenal to me where it's gotten in 15 years or so.
Yeah, one of the things that surprised me, having also been raised a Christian and my deconversion process being more recent than yours, you'd mentioned Bertrand Russell didn't invent atheism in the 50s. The thing that shocked me, and I wanted to mention that a lot of the books that Jeff talked about and articles on those books and plenty of other essays, one really good resource online is infidels.org, their library. They have a historical library and a modern library. Some of these books are available, the whole book is available at their website, but also there's commentary and
Do you mean online, or do they sell it?
No, it's just free. Infidels.org/library. Right. I'm pretty sure all of Bertrand Russell's Why I'm Not a Christian, that essay is completely available there. But the thing I was getting at is that one of the authors there in the historical section is somebody that I'd never heard of and is now probably my favorite person who's ever lived.
Ingersoll.
Is Ingersoll.
And if I had any books by him, boy, I'd have brought them, but I don't happen to have any.
All of his essays are available in the infidels.org library.
Robert Ingersoll was a guy who, back in those days, you didn't get together and watch TV. You went down to some theater venue, and there'd be a speaker.
Yeah, we're talking about 1870s, 80s, 90s.
Right, late 1800s. About the same time period as this anthology of atheism about the British freethinkers that I was talking about before. And Ingersoll was a hugely famous, popular atheist speaker. And
popular not just among atheists.
Right.
He was friends with clergy members. He made he spoke at the Republican National Convention and other things like that. I mean, he was extremely well known, and his essays are just as biting and direct today as they were 130, 40 years ago, or 115, 20, whatever it was. And it shocked me because here I am, I've been raised in a Christian environment, and here's somebody who's saying things a century before I'm born, that are some of the most powerful and important things I've ever read. And he wasn't, it's nice that those records are still there so that I was able to read them, so that, his words were able to impact my life. But it's shocking to me that this happened in public. He would stand out there and talk to huge crowds about what's wrong with the Bible and why Christianity and the Bible is a bunch of nonsense and is violent and absurd, and how hands that help are far more important than hands that pray. And he said all that, and was lauded and loved, and now nobody even really knows who he is. We've lost so much ground from that 19th century freethinkers movement, and it's because of this fundamentalist conservative backlash of let's get back to core values, and as if the world was really going
I don't think
apart.
we can blame the recent resurgence of Christian fundamentalism, which only goes back about 20 years or so.
Well, I think there's been a couple of different waves.
I think that what we've got is the situation where Christians have been hunting down and removing the works of Ingersoll for they've had 100 years to do it.
Yeah.
And it only takes a little bit, a prejudiced Christian here and a prejudiced Christian there to go and over 100 years remove all references to Ingersoll.
I don't necessarily know that's been that symptomatic. Somebody else that's fallen prey to that, of course, Thomas Paine.
Thomas
Paine may be the most important person in the entire history of the United States. Came up with the name the United States of America, was a friend of Benjamin Franklin, brought over freethinker ideas, was crucial to the Declaration of Independence, to the Constitution, everything else. Mm-hmm. And it's because of one little book of his, The Age of Reason, where he basically railed against organized religion, that he's been kind of sidelined in history.
Even though he was not an atheist.
No, he was a deist.
Yeah.
But let's go on and get some calls. We got some people on the line calling in. We got Mark. How you doing?
Hey, Matt.
Hey.
I just read it. You guys were talking about books. I just finished reading one called Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, C.S. Lewis.
He was an atheist and went the other way to Christian. And this little book is a compilation of broadcast talks in 42, Christian behavior in 43, and beyond personality in 44. It's got some interesting concepts, and I'm sure you're familiar with all of them. So
I've read his
enjoy
books.
your show.
Okay.
Was that it? Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Of course, we're not talking about Christian books today. We're talking about atheist books.
That's all right, though, because somebody brings up Mere Christianity. Mere Christianity is C.S. Lewis's kind of response, I guess, or equivalent to Bertrand Russell's "Why I'm Not a Christian." It's C.S. Lewis's "Why I Am a Christian," and it's for Christians. It's often cited and referenced as one of the most impactful books that they've read. They talk about it the way I would talk about Ingersoll or Russell or somebody else.
So what's your take on it, having read it? Because I haven't.
It's silly.
Silly.
Yes. The core argument is that you have to make some kind of decision about who Jesus was, and he was either liar, lunatic, or Lord.
Oh, that's where that comes from.
Liar, lunatic, Lord, the trilemma comes from there, which completely ignores the other option of legend. And the other thing is that he makes arguments from morality, that you can't have a moral society or you can't have morals without God as the author of that. And also kind of, I would say arguments
Does he
from
address the
design,
Euthyphro dilemma?
No.
Just dodges it.
Well, I say no because I don't see anybody ever address the Euthyphro dilemma.
Okay.
But, I don't know that it was presented specifically that way. Yeah. He was the author of the Narnia series. He's got a couple other of inspirational books and focusing primarily on Christianity. But for the people who feel that his arguments are so powerful and so strong, they're really not. His arguments are just as weak as anybody else's. He just writes really well, and he goes for the emotion. It's akin to Francis Collins, who's a physicist working was the head of the Human Genome Project, who cites Mere Christianity as one of his major influences. His conversion point was he saw a waterfall frozen into 3 separate sections, and that reminded him of the Trinity, which was proof of God. And when I hear that, I'm like, and you're the head of the Human Genome Project?
Once I saw a fork that had 3 tines.
I know. It's a good thing that waterfall wasn't split into like 10 or 12, or he'd be in a Hindu. Just, we got Mike on the line. How you doing?
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Hi, Mike.
First of all, I want to commend you guys on doing such a good job. You guys are very informative.
Thank you.
Great. But basically, I want us to talk about the religion in a whole, and also if you guys can elaborate on the new world religion, the one world religion that's inevitably going to happen. What's your intake on that, and what do you see religion in a whole as it being in America? What do you see the faith? How do you see the faith of Christianity in America in reference to the one world religion that would inevitably happen?
Well, I mean, I don't really accept your premise that it's inevitable that we're going to have one world religion. It seems to be the nature of religions because they're all basically, they're all based on faith, and they're all based in interpretations of ancient writings. And as a result, people that take stuff on faith and people that are interpreting ancient writings are going to have different opinions. And it seems to be the nature of religions to splinter into little groups rather than to unite into one whole.
But basically what I'm saying is, and I understand that, but what inevitably is going to happen that you see, because of when you have all the Arabs, the Hebrews, the Jews, the Christians, it's all a big it's all a big uproar. So what do you see? What's going to happen as far as a median as far as religion? Because we cannot keep going through this and all the bloodshed and the violence. Inevitably, what do you think that's going to happen?
Well, it depends on what kind of time scale you're talking about. If you're talking like long time, like thousands of years, then I think the majority of the world are going to end up being atheists. Now,
really?
A lot of people don't necessarily agree with me, but the thing is that one of the things that props up religion, that keeps religion going, is that it seems to answer questions. It seems to provide answers to the unknown. It doesn't, in fact, provide any answers. To say that God did it is the ultimate non-answer because you don't know anything more than you did when you asked the question. You've just, okay, I'm going to put a label on the unknown and call it God. As human knowledge increases over many years from now, as we learn more about origins and as our cultures blend and mesh more and people have to get along, assuming we don't destroy each other ourselves completely, I think you're going to see a much more secular world. There will always be probably people who have religious beliefs. They may be dissimilar. I mean, you see a lot of New Age frou-frou nonsense nowadays with, homeopathy and crystal therapy and whatever other crap they're shoveling to people. I think you'll see those things together becoming kind of the new religion, but there won't be the same kind of dogma that you get from, like the big three religions or any of that. But it's all just a guess. I mean, if I could predict the future, I don't think I'd be doing this show.
And my second question is, the Mithra religion was before Christianity. Mm-hmm. Why do you, or how do you think, well, what's your perspective on how it was able, that Christianity was able to thrive over the Mithra religion? And
you're talking about Mithra as in Zoroastrianism and et cetera. And I think those religious beliefs were co-opted into Christianity. I can't prove that, and it doesn't matter whether they were or not. But I think that's a lot of what happened when you look back at history. You've got the ancient, the Old Testament, the Jewish Tanakh, and Tracie's been talking about this with the different gods that are mentioned in there. It could have just been, we're going to adopt all these Babylonian gods and other myths and legends. And then morph. Religion changes over time. Take a look at what the average Christian believes today and compare that to what the average Christian in the United States believed 100 years ago. There's big differences. They like to claim that they that they've moral absolutes, and some even go for literal interpretations of the Bible, which is an oxymoron anyway, literal interpretation. But the fact is, their religion changes, their beliefs change, and they change just at the same rate that, some of them are a little slower. They change at about the same rate that the rest of society's beliefs change. As people wake up to the idea that, you should not be allowed to own someone else as property, all of a sudden, slavery falls out of fashion and becomes illegal, despite the fact that the Bible explicitly endorses slavery. You're not going to find too many Christians today who favor slavery. They'll look back and come up with some ad hoc excuse of, well, that was a different time, or that meant something different, or they weren't slaves the way we have slaves now. The fact of the matter is they were slaves. The Bible endorsed slavery, told about prices, how you mark them by driving a spike through their ear, who you can enslave, how much you can sell your daughter into slavery for, and how long she's got to be a slave. I mean, it's all in there, but their religion has changed. It's this kind of anachronistic whimsy that lets them think that their religion hasn't changed.
Yeah, let me try to just say a couple more things to get back to directly addressing Mike's question. I haven't studied the history regarding Christianity and Mithraism, so I'm not going to speak in terms of historical facts. But it's undeniable that a big part of religion, of the behavior of religion, of how it spreads and thrives, that it changes over time, and it does that largely by finding ways of appealing to more people, right? And of course, it's more complex than that, because Christians will say, well, but our religion isn't all about just telling you what you want to hear, because we say all these bad things about you. Yeah, but if you're saying some bad things about telling people some bad things about themselves in order that then, as a stick, so you can drive them toward the carrot of your eternal life. Ultimately, the job of the religion is to spread and propagate and bring in more converts and grow bigger and larger and more powerful by telling people what they want to hear.
And guilt is powerful.
Yeah,
guilt is extremely powerful.
Right. So I would just be amazed if we did not find that many different religions shared many of the same claims, either because they're all going after human beings, and all human beings are attracted to some of the same kinds of ideas, or because literally the followers of one religion saw another religion out-competing them and said, well, that religion's doing better because they promise this thing, so we're going to promise something very, very similar so that we can compete. It would just amaze me if we didn't see those kinds of similarities between religions now.
Okay, and also, from what I understand, that religion was brought by because man failed the law of nature, which simply means that man knows right from wrong, and that's what I think, or what I read, that's the reason for.
I'm not sure I quite understood what you said.
Yeah, but if you wanna hear philosophers talking about and scientists talking about where they think religion came from, we did cover two books at the beginning of this show that you might want to look at. One is Breaking the Spell by Daniel Dennett, and the other one is not out yet. It'll be out in October, and it's called The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins.
Yeah,
okay, guys, that's all I want to know. Thank you.
All right, okay. Thanks a lot, Mike. Let's go on to Tracie. How you doing?
Hey, doing all right.
Hi, Tracie.
Hey.
Long time no see.
No, not really.
Tracie, we said hello to each other on the bat boat last night.
Yes, we did.
And at first I didn't know who you were because I haven't seen you in a long time because I don't get this show on TV.
Okay.
I have only heard your voice over the podcast for the last year.
Okay.
And I'm going, who is that? Oh my God, that's Tracie.
I got a lot longer hair now, I think, than last time I saw it.
For some reason, I thought you were a blonde.
Wow. No, that's
don't know why. I don't mean any. Not because of the way you talk. It's just my brain connected that voice with a particular face.
Well, thanks for qualifying.
I promise I'm going to stop insulting you any second.
Oh man,
it's not an insult.
I didn't call to be abused. You got to be nice
I'm the
to your
one that
callers,
made a
or
mistake.
people aren't going to call. Anyway, I had initially called in because I wanted to talk about the classic Star Trek takes on religion. But before I get to that, oh my gosh, just the other callers. Just to hit real again on what Matt was talking about with the Lord Liar lunatic argument. Oh, it drives me nuts. one of the comic strips is geared toward that, where it shows all the crazy delusions that so many people believe. And these are not lunatics. These are people that work in your office, that live next door, that, perfectly functioning citizens in society who believe that aliens visit, who believe that Bigfoot exists, who believe that you have crystal power, who, believe that their dead grandmother's ghost came to see them last week or haunts their old house where they grew up. There's people that believe all kinds of weird delusions. There are so many people that believe in ghosts, and it's just, it's not even embarrassing for someone to say, I believe in ghosts.
It's all over TV.
Yeah.
You've got
so
ghost hunters and spirit medium and all this crap all over the place. And while I love fantasy and sci-fi as much as anybody else, that's probably
as
a good chunk of what I watch.
entertainment.
Yeah, I don't sit around. The ghost hunter shows, the ones that try to be like documentary-like, they drive me nuts. I want to just, pull my fingernails off while I'm watching them because, oh my gosh, did you hear that creaking floorboard?
Well,
what?
Well, my thing is, I think that a lot of these people are very sincere. I've heard people talk about they believe in ghosts and they're really sincere about it. It's like they're not lying, and it doesn't mean ghosts exist, and they're not raving lunatics. They are just mistaken. And there can be lots of people that are mistaken, as is shown by the numbers of people who believe in ghosts and believe in aliens. There's lots of them, and lots of people can have the same delusion, and it's not, we see it all the time. The Lord Liar lunatic argument doesn't fly. And the other thing was about when you're talking about C.S. Lewis and morality and, God and morality and no morality without God. It's like I can't think of, off the cuff, I can't think of many more social groups that are more what I consider moral than Buddhist groups. They're totally passive. You never see Buddhists going and invading somebody else's country. They have no notion of God. They do not believe in an eternal life reward, and yet they do good just because they believe this is the right thing to do, and it makes your life good if you do good things. Basically just being good makes you more comfortable than trying to be evil. And things that drive you to be evil usually will make you an unhappy person. So
I've been, I'm not a fan of the supernatural elements of Buddhism with reincarnation and everything, but I've always said, Buddhists are some of my favorite people. I don't like to party with them because they're not tons of fun, but I could hang with them for a while.
When I stopped being a Christian, I did cast around a little bit for another religion, and I looked at Buddhism, and I like the same stuff about it that you just mentioned. But again, it was the supernatural elements that made me have to say no.
Yeah, and I can understand that. But the idea of morality requiring a God, it's like, well, there's I don't know many Christians that I would consider to be as moral as most Buddhists, and I see some really angry Christians. I have yet to see a really angry Buddhist.
Now, in fairness, there are secular Buddhists that don't have any supernatural beliefs.
Are there really?
It's a philosophical, I'm going to meditate and I'm going to follow this philosophy, but I don't necessarily believe in reincarnation or any of the other
And I take reincarnation to be, and I know that not everybody does, but I take it to just be like a metaphor for lives that we live within this life. That you basically go through different stages of your life and you have different aspects of yourself that are sort of like different lives. And I think that became like more of a literal thing to people, and then it spawned reincarnation as a mythology. But anyway, when you were talking about Christianity and how it absorbs other religions, I had written down in my little notes here, it morphs, and you said that. It came right out of your mouth, and I was like, that's just funny, because that's exactly what I wrote. Christianity, the idea that how will Christianity change? It's like the question is, how won't it change? It changes all the time. It's constantly changing. There's so many different factions of it. It's like take your pick. And it has absorbed every other culture's religious ideas, holidays, gods, you name it. It just goes in, says your God is our God, and now you're going to come to church and worship your God, and you're going to call him Yahweh instead of the Great Spirit, or instead of, whatever you're worshiping currently.
Going back to the morality thing that you had mentioned, and we talked about before with C.S. Lewis, his argument basically being that God is the author of morality, and there's this absolute morality. We talked about it some last week in detail about the immorality of the God of the Old Testament, specifically the actions, endorsing rape and torture and human sacrifice and everything else. And then the God of the New Testament, which is markedly different, who's going to punish people forever for finite crimes. And what you do, if you actually take a look at what's represented as morality in there, I mean, the God itself is a bit on the schizophrenic side, because if you take a look, I think it's Exodus 34 verses 6 and 7, right off the bat there, he's described as slow to anger and ultimately full of love and forgiveness. Well, if you read the Bible, starting in Genesis, the very first time that his creations ever disobey him, he immediately goes off, kicks them out, and punishes all of humanity to come. Does that sound like slow to anger?
Right, I understand.
First
and the other thing
offense,
is,
and you're going to punish everybody.
Why create beings with free will when you're going to freak out the moment they use it?
Not to mention the fact that these two people couldn't have known that what they did was wrong until after they did it.
Right. But I mean, my point is, why create free will if you're not going to allow people to exercise it?
Yeah.
In the moment they exercise it, you're going to punish them.
You got free will, but if you do the wrong thing, I'm going to smack you.
That's free will with a gun to your head.
Right.
That's not free will.
But and anyway, to get to the Star Trek things,
yeah.
I thought of like one or two, and then while I was sitting and waiting, I just kept thinking. I don't know how much of classic Star Trek. It sounds, Jeff, like you might have seen a lot of it.
I've got the entire original series on DVD.
Okay. Do you remember the one where McCoy is going to marry the priestess? And they live inside the spaceship, and it's a world. They think it's the world, but they live in the spaceship. And it's like so many generations they've been in there that they don't know that it's just a spaceship. Right. And so she's the priestess, and they're not allowed to climb up high enough to touch the ceiling, because that would let them know that they're encased in a ball, and it's not the sky. And so they have this computer, which is usually the thing. They have a computer that's gone haywire, that's now running the culture, and everybody worships it and thinks that it's the God. Right. And, at the end of the program, of course, the right thing to do is take down the God and allow the people to, use their reason and progress.
Right.
And then he had another one. There was another one where they had, like, all these primitives that lived on a planet where they worshipped this big dragon snake kind of cave.
Yep.
Yeah, and those people, that actually was Eden. Like, you had the Eden and you had the serpent in Eden that was, ironically, the God. So they had the serpent was God in the garden. And then you had, like, all the people bringing it things to worship it. And then finally what happens is, they realize that this thing is throwing down punishment for anybody that questions it. It's like striking people with lightning and whatever. Right. And they decide, okay, we got to destroy this thing somehow because this is just wrong. And I remember at that point they had the idea of, can we interfere with the culture? Because that was one of the rules. We're not allowed to interfere with the culture. And Kirk says, we're interfering because these people are not progressing. And this is not a normally progressing society. They've got a problem here, and so we need to take this thing out so that they can actually progress.
Right.
And then there was the other one where you had, like, the cult people that were all hippies, and they were trying to find Eden. Right. And it turns out that Eden is nothing but a myth, and they find the planet, and it turns out to just be horrible. It just doesn't exist. There is no Eden. And then there was the one where you had the Roman gods, and your book that you were describing reminded me of that. The Roman gods were all fading because they needed to be worshipped. If you didn't worship them, they would fade away, and all the gods faded away, and Apollo was left. Do you remember this?
Right. And he's on a planet, and they come down, and he says, oh, it's humans. I remember you guys. You're going to worship me again.
Yeah, and so he wants all of them to worship him because he needs it in order to exist. And in the end, the gods they really were just aliens who needed worship to survive.
Yeah, very interestingly, Reginald Findlay, the infidel guy who has a podcast, had a woman on, gosh, I don't remember her name, but she worked as Gene Roddenberry's secretary, executive secretary, in the years following the original Star Trek series. And Reginald Findlay had her on as a guest where they discussed Gene Roddenberry's non-belief and humanism and how it got into the TV shows.
Yeah.
And they mentioned a particular episode from the Next Generation series. The episode number is somewhere in the 90s. I can't remember the specific number, but the title was Who Watches the Watchers? And in it, there's a team of observers watching a primitive culture, and they have this cloaking technology that renders them invisible. But there's a machinery breakdown, and they become visible momentarily, and the locals decide that these are the gods.
Okay.
And Picard has to bring one of them up to the Enterprise to show, no, we're not gods, it's just technology, right?
Right.
And Picard says at one point, we used to believe in gods like you do, but we gave it up like we gave up all superstitions.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the show is absolutely, atheist-minded driven. And I had never noticed it when I was a little Christian growing up and I watched it every day after school. But now when I watch it as an adult, not even watching it as an adult, because honestly, the last episode I saw was like just last weekend. I didn't even know they were airing it still on regular,
but
cable.
it's boy, we're way off topic now. But they've re-released the original series with all of the primitive model photography of the spaceships replaced with computer graphics.
Okay. Well,
so if you see that again, check and see if like the planets look real and stuff.
Okay.
That's the new
instead of rubber
updated
balls
version. And they re-recorded the theme song and all kinds of stuff.
I'll just run through there's like a couple more, I'll just run through them real quick so I don't waste any more time. I'm sure you guys have other people. But they had the one where the pilot episode was about the guy that gets all the power, remember?
Yeah.
And he becomes like a god, and he starts thinking of himself like a god. And then his take is, since I'm so powerful, I could just crush you like ants, and what difference does it make? You mean nothing. And you see that a lot in the Old Testament. And then there was the one where the flowers were spraying people and they got all like strange and,
and
they were all paradise and it's all paradise and perfect here because the flowers, they were all drugged out. And it was just scary because it was so much like a religious cult. And then you had the other one that I think just nailed it was the Will of Landru. Remember Landru? It was like they had the planet where all the people were like, hey, brother, and they all dressed like Puritans, and then every day at like noon they just would rape and pillage for like 10 minutes or so. It was like they all go nuts because the computer was driving them crazy. And that was the same thing where they just go in and destroyed Landru. But my favorite one was that one with where they have the snake in the garden, and it is God. I mean, I just thought that was like such a great transposition of the symbols, of the religious symbols, to say that the evil in the garden is actually God.
Yeah, and I always liked it right from the beginning of The Next Generation, where you've got Q, who is a god, but they're going to call him a god, and at the same time point out that he's not a god. He's like Sagan would point out, sufficiently advanced that he would appear as such.
And just before I sign off, the same one with the snake. It's like the answer to the evil in the garden was knowledge. We kill this thing and we teach you how to survive and how to think for yourselves and progress on your own.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's all I had.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Trace.
Okay.
Thanks for calling, Tracy. And remember, I'm actually blonder than you, so.
Yeah. As a reminder, everybody involved in the show gets together and goes to Threadgills down on Riverside afterwards. We're on the air at 6 o'clock. We'll be at Threadgills around 6:30 or so. Anybody in town who's watching live, you're welcome to come down. Atheist-friendly people. But if you come down to preach or provoke or whatever, just pick up the phone and dial in. The number will be back up on your screen in a moment, and you can tell us why you're right and you're wrong, and why I'm sure I'm working for the devil or whatever. We got Phil. How you doing?
Hey guys, how you doing?
Hi, Phil.
Hey, really enjoy your show.
Thanks.
I appreciate the book review. I'm sitting here writing down books for my Christmas list right now. But I want to let you know, I really am glad you mentioned the C.S. Lewis book, Mere Christianity.
Yeah.
Because I remember when I was going through I was raised a fundamental Christian. I was going through my faith crisis, and everybody said, this was in the early 90s. You just read Mere Christianity. And
it'll solve everything. It's like better than the Bible to some people.
And I remember I read it, and if I'm not mistaken, in the very beginning of that book, he says, we might need to make a few little assumptions before we go on. And one of the assumptions he makes is, okay, let's just assume that everything we read in the New Testament actually happened, and it's all true. And then from then on, he makes all his points about Jesus and, the trilemma and all that. And I remember reading that going, well, wait a minute. Isn't anybody paying attention to this little assumption he made in the beginning? It's all true.
Yeah, and it's the big reason. The other book that apologists point to very quickly is Josh McDowell's Evidence That Demands a Verdict. And the reason that they point to it is because Josh's whole purpose is to provide evidential support for C.S. Lewis's assumptions.
Yeah.
He wants to provide a big argument that says it's okay to believe that everything that the New Testament says is correct.
Is true.
Yeah.
And the problem is that
Josh's scholarship is
pretty good too.
What was that?
Somebody wrote a book that rebuts that pretty good too. I can't remember.
Yeah, there's a copy up at infidels.org. Josh McDowell's scholarship is so deplorable. And I mean, as a gift, I was given the newest, it's like the new evidence that demands a verdict to or whatever, and it's this big hardbound thick where he's gone through and corrected some of the things that people have pointed out were just flat out wrong in the original one. And then when you get to looking at it, you'll find that basically he's just got a whole bunch of arguments that are disguising the fact that he's actually just willing to make the exact same assumptions that C.S. Lewis was willing to make.
And Josh, isn't he one of those guys that his story is, oh, I was a Christian and I set out to disprove it.
Right.
And I couldn't.
Yeah.
Like, well...
Yeah, Josh McDowell and Lee Strobel both play that, and it's one of the most laughable things because I did. And you take a look at like Lee Strobel's The Case for Christ or The Case for a Creator. He pretends to be a skeptic because that's the role that he claims to have played before becoming a Christian.
Yeah.
And he goes out and interviews people to get the facts. Let's ask them the hard questions.
Yeah.
And what you find is that he never once interviews somebody who doesn't already agree with his position to begin with.
It's a shame.
So you're only getting one side, and he never asks them the difficult questions.
Yeah.
It's like minor league softball.
I don't know why it is that people think that is somehow persuasive. I mean, we have the same kind of problem with Christians who start out a discussion with an atheist by saying, "Well, I used to be an atheist too."
Exactly. I get all that all the time.
I've never encountered a Christian who used to be an atheist who, when they were an atheist, knew the arguments that atheists use to justify their atheism.
Yeah, there's a difference between not believing and having reasons for not believing.
I guess mere atheism is what they had. You know,
Yeah.
they believed, but they had no clue, or they didn't believe, but they had no clue why it might be a good idea to refrain from believing in that stuff.
Well, I think they really don't want to.
Well, they'll play that as a card to try to, elevate themselves to some position of authority. Because I used to believe like you did, therefore you should take me seriously.
That's right.
Kirk Cameron does that in Ray Comfort's The Way of the Master series that he does with Kirk Cameron. Kirk comes up and makes the claim, oh yeah, I was a devout atheist. And then not 10 seconds later, when he was describing what devout atheist is, he turns around and says, but it wasn't really based on anything. I just believed, in evolution that they taught us in school, and I thought that had all the answers. And I'm like, well, first of all, what the hell is a devout atheist anyway? I mean, that just doesn't... If there is such a thing as a devout atheist, if that term has any meaning, I think it'd be people kind of like Jeff and myself, where you have a rational basis for it. You are an advocate for atheism as a positive thing. You have sound reasons for believing what you believe and disbelieving what you disbelieve. Yeah. But to say you were a devout atheist and that it wasn't really based on anything, I mean, that's like saying I'm a Christian, but I've never looked at the Bible.
Yeah, I'm afraid that a devout atheist would be somebody who's an atheist dogmatically, who would not, unlike Matt and I, right? The dogmatic atheist would not be swayed by actual evidence in support of the existence of a God. We would, and that's why I think we're not devout.
Yep. Yeah, I would agree. I think it's a stupid term to use, but if there was such a thing, the implication, the meaning that he put behind it, wasn't dogmatic atheist. It was I was a serious, committed atheist.
But he had no idea why.
Yeah,
guys, I'm gonna let you go. Enjoy your show.
Thanks a lot, Phil.
Thanks for calling.
We got Jay. How you doing?
I'm not as fast as y'all are. Last week, you, the one that answered the phone, you brought up the book of Judges.
Mm-hmm.
What was the other book?
For which part?
Oh, Lord. That guy that stayed on the telephone with you so long that he was talking about death, that God would never condemn, be cruel or mean, or commandments or something of that nature.
Well, the things that I talked about last week, there was the story of Jephthah, which is in Judges 11. Then there's Abraham on Isaac, which is in Genesis 22. And I just happen to have my notes here from last week.
Don't be so fast for old people.
Sure.
I know. You know that.
Judges chapter 11.
11. Okay.
And then Genesis 22.
22.
That's the Abraham and Isaac story. And then I don't know what else you might have been looking for.
No, just those two in that sense, because that was the two you discussed with Tim. And I couldn't find the Bible. Old people put up things, and we don't know where we put them.
Hey, you don't have to be old to do that. I've lost enough stuff this week.
And I was just going to go back well, I'm the opposite of my sister. She goes to, I'm not going to say where, but she goes to, well, particularly a Baptist church, and I don't believe the way that they do if I have a faith, but I believe within my own self, because I make my own, decisions and stuff like that, what I feel is right and wrong. Mm-hmm. But anyway, that's what I wanted to know, and I thank you for answering my question.
Thanks, Jay.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks for calling.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I nearly couldn't find my copy of The End of Faith, and I really wanted it for my stack of books to review today.
It throws me
I
off
was
because you have
going
a different
nuts.
Cover.
Oh, is that it?
I have the black, the first run
Well,
cover.
I knew what it looked like. I just couldn't find it.
Yeah.
And so it came that close to not even doing this topic after I had told everybody that I would.
Which is really it's sad because as soon as I saw your email saying what we were going to talk about, I was like,
Yeah.
that's going to be great because we've had emails recently
Uh-huh.
of, can you recommend a book about this? Or
Right.
what do you think is a good book about this? And a lot of it, we had other callers on today who were former Christians who have, for whatever reason, abandoned Christianity. Mm-hmm. And, my process took a couple of years and involved different books and different study than Jeff's process did. My Ingersoll was huge. But I was rather uneducated on all matters of philosophy and religion outside of just what I had been taught growing up. So I became passionately interested in everything that has to do with philosophy and religion, and at all ages. I went back and I read, Voltaire and Thomas Paine and Ingersoll and stuff from different centuries, and then also hit on modern philosophers. Daniel Dennett, a huge, influence on the changes in the way I think. Mm-hmm. But also, there's some people who've been really hitting the fine points of objecting to specific religions. And it wasn't like I was a Christian and then all of a sudden I woke up one day and said, no, I'm not a Christian anymore, so I'm an atheist. I mean, the first step was I wanted to justify my own beliefs. I believe that this is true. Do I have a good reason for it? Is this justifiable? Is it reasonable? Once you find out, no, it's actually not reasonable. It's not supported by evidence. It's not probably a good thing to believe. It comes down to whether or not you care, whether or not the things you believe are true. But once I got to the point where I dismissed Christianity, or could have written an essay on why I'm not a Christian, I then had to say, well, what about other religions?
Right.
I've only argued against one of them. What about some other religion? Because it's so pervasive that the common sense instinct answer is surely one of these religions must be right. So many people have just instinctively believed in a God that there must be something to it. And the truth is, yes, there must be something to it, but it mustn't be supernatural at all. It's a matter of human nature, of uncomfortable with not knowing the answers to things and being frightened of your own mortality and death and feeling alone and wanting somebody who cares about you and everything else. Those are the types of things that I found made the most sense. And I ended up having to rework my thinking about all kinds of things, both moral questions and issues of what is right and wrong, because there are plenty of things that believers will just flat out say are wrong, and the only justification that they have for that is their holy book. Homosexuality is an abomination sin, and it's that way because the Bible says so. Well, once you've chucked the Bible and any other nonsense like that, you have to then reevaluate it, and you say, okay, is this something that I think is morally wrong? Or have I been wrong all this time about, my views on it?
Right. And where do standards of moral rightness and wrongness come from if, in fact, there's not some big guy in the sky telling us what they are?
And as we mentioned on yesterday's Nonprofits, atheism isn't itself a dogma, and it isn't a philosophy. It is more the result of philosophical ideas, rationalism, naturalism, materialism, etc.
Right.
And that's why there's many paths to
atheism doesn't say anything about morality other than gods don't have anything to do with it.
Yeah. We got a couple other callers on the line. There's like 10 minutes left in the show. As a quick reminder, we'll be going to Threadgills after the show. We're off in 10 minutes, and we'll be there about 6:30. Any atheist or atheist-friendly people, welcome to come down and join us. We got Steve on the line. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good.
Hi, Steve.
Your discussion of your books that you read reminded me of when I was in college and I took this basic philosophy class, and one of the things we had to read was one of the writings of Rene Descartes, and I can't remember exactly the title of it, but basically I'm sure you know what it was. It's basically he goes through and claims that he is going to forget everything he knew and go back to like knowing zero and see if he could reconstruct whether or not the existence of God was valid or not.
Right.
And what was interesting, at the time I was kind of in the state of I would probably pretty much rejected any actual belief, but I wasn't ready to say I didn't believe. You know, I was still holding out like, what maybe somebody will show me how I can, you know?
Right.
And I always did really like the idea of like, you know, no idea if it's true. We used to be afraid of being rejected and then reconstructed like that. You know, I mean, if it's really true, it's going to hold up, and there shouldn't have any fear of knowledge ruining something that's true. It just can't do it.
Yeah, we're having a hard time kind of understanding. There's something wrong with the phone line, but I think he's making a similar point to Dennett in that if whether or not a belief's true should be a matter of open investigation. It should need to be protected from a scrutinizing eye, because the truth doesn't fear in critical thinking. It doesn't fear being challenged.
That's one of the arguments.
When I started reading this thing, I was just so excited at the beginning because he was going through this, but he was kind of saying the same thing, and that here's what he was going to do, and he was going to, and then he went through it, and he ended up, in my opinion, coming up with the lamest way of reconstructing it. Basically, it was just, he ended up concluding that God existed because it was just too perfect an idea for him to have thought of, basically, is the way I took it.
Yeah, I'm pretty much of the opinion.
The thing that got me, though, it made me go, you know what, I'm not so dumb. You know, I've been waiting for somebody to do it. If he can't do it, guess what, you know? And he was really not being honest, I don't think, at the beginning. You know, to me it was just a kind of a BS deal, so.
I hate to do this, Steve, but I'm afraid I'm only catching about every second or third word. There's something really terrible with the line.
So. The phone thing,
but thanks a lot for calling. We'll let you go and try and get some other calls real quick. Appreciate the call.
Yeah, that argument is like, you know, space aliens must have made the pyramids because we don't know for sure how they made them.
I liked Descartes for one thing. As a matter of fact, my current position is that Rene Descartes was wrong about everything except for one thing, and that was I think, therefore I am. And there you have the foundations of epistemology and your stopping point at, I don't need to do an infinite regress. And he got that right, and he got everything else wrong. But that's me, and you're welcome to have different philosophical positions. I just happen to care whether or not what I believe is likely to be true. But Chris, how you doing?
Good. How are you guys?
Good.
I was calling in, you guys were talking just a few, I tuned in late, but I heard you talking about, the books you read and different stuff, that helped you to sort of change your mind about, your beliefs prior to, what they are now.
Let me clarify. These books didn't change my beliefs. These books informed me of the arguments in support of a position I'd already reached on my own.
Okay.
Just to be clear.
Okay. Well, okay, see, that's where I don't know, it's kind of weird because, it's like, I don't find it made any sense. Even when I was a child, like religion and the whole idea of God, it never made any sense to me. And for me, I guess it's just me. I mean, I've got a nephew that's kind of the same way, but for me, I never needed to read anybody else or their opinion on it because it just didn't make any sense, and that was enough for me to go,
well, you're
why,
you're
why
smarter than me then,
nobody
and
else
more
has
power
to
to you.
validate my belief or whatever. And I was talking. I've got a nephew. He's a young kid. He's only 12, but when he was like 11 years old, we were going out to eat one night, and he rode with me in my car, and he says, I don't believe in God. And I go, well, why do you not believe in God? And he said, it doesn't make any sense. It's completely beyond anything real. And
yeah, may I?
And
yeah, but hang on a second.
I don't know. It's just kind of weird. Like I mean, I understand what you guys are saying, but to me, it's just kind of weird. I mean, they don't. I don't know. It's just weird to hear people say they had to. Not that like you're saying you already believed it or thought you believed it, but that you needed to read someone who agreed with you.
Well, that's not what we said at all.
Let me explain. I did not need these books to make me feel comfortable, but I did need to read these books because not having thought about atheism as much as all these different people who wrote these different books had, I was just not aware of all the different philosophical defenses there were against the common and constant criticisms that I was going to get from believers. You see? I mean, there is more. Yeah, sure, atheism is just not believing, but there's not believing and being prepared to back it up with arguments. Right,
right, but
and not believing and not being prepared. And so when we were talking earlier about Kirk Cameron, who says on his TV show that he used to be a devout atheist, but it's clear he never knew any of the arguments in favor of atheism, because if he did, he wouldn't be a believer now.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I completely understand this idea that you mentioned that it doesn't make sense. I think the problem is that many people are very, very good at rationalizing things so that even if it doesn't make sense, they're going to believe anyway. And when you've been raised and you've had certain beliefs and you've never really questioned it, sure, for people who just say, well, this doesn't make any sense or I don't care, or whatever the reason is. I didn't read these books to give me new opinions. I read these books because I wanted to examine the issue from all perspectives.
No, what I'm saying is I understand that, but I mean, like, my family was Catholic, so it wasn't like I wasn't exposed, so, people actually, they hear that and they're kind of like, wow, you don't, believe it, but, I used to go to the 12-step meeting, and I can't, I'm not going to talk about it overly, but there was a person there that we used to get into these philosophical arguments about that, about God and stuff, and I've never, like a lot of the books you've read, I've never read those or whatever, and we would argue back and forth, and I would state the reasons I believe what I believe or don't believe what I don't believe or whatever. And the guy said, damn, you could be a philosopher. And to me, I just think in everybody, really, they got that, where you don't really need to hear what other people's argument is because really you already have that in your head anyway.
Disagree.
If you really think about it.
I completely disagree because I don't...
There are, for thousands of years, we're talking about just Christianity. Of course, there are many religions all around the world. But for thousands of years, Christians have been coming up with arguments to try to make atheists look like morons. And I want to know what the defenses against those arguments are. And I'm not going to come up with all of them on my own. It's just not possible.
I don't think it'd be a very good show. Hang on. I don't think it'd be a very good show every week if every time a Christian called in, I just said, your beliefs are stupid. It's nonsense. It makes no sense to me. Goodbye.
Those aren't the arguments I have with people.
Well, I'm just saying.
Stupid or whatever. I would sit there and we'd rationally go over whatever his point was, and I understand
say
how I had a different point of view.
Good for you, dude. Don't tell us not to. Don't criticize us for wanting to actually, do some research.
I understand. It's for some people it made sense, and we're almost out of time. I have to let you go real quick, but yeah, for some people it just it didn't make sense, and some people pick up other things quicker than others. I wanted to be ready. I didn't spend years, and I continue to study. I don't continue to study to keep reaffirming what I believe or to keep, providing new arguments or whatever. I do it so that I can be ready to answer questions on this show, so that when somebody calls up and says, what do you think about the ontological argument, I don't have to hem and haw. I know what they're talking about, and I know what I think about it.
And I want to add that in the course of years of debating with Christians about this sort of thing, I have myself come up with philosophical arguments that I didn't read anywhere else, that I did come up with on my own. It's not an either or. It's not if you read books to get information about atheism, therefore you don't think for yourself. I mean, I certainly agree where the caller was with where the caller was coming from, that people can work stuff out for themselves. But I don't agree that it's pointless to read the thoughts that have already
Why do all the work
been
when
thought?
some of it's been done before you? I mean, I'm not going to come up with everything Dawkins comes up with, but if I read it, all of a sudden it makes sense and save me a lot of time.
Yeah.
We're about out of time. As a reminder, we'll be going to Threadgills. Hope to see some of you down there on Riverside. We'll be back again next week. I believe Tracie, who called in earlier, is going to be on next week, but I'll have to double check. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in a week.
Bye, folks.